Hello, folks. I am Joshua Gonzalez. This is Housing 101 by Abundant Housing LA. Let me get my little presentation up and ready to share with y'all. If you don't know, Housing 101 is always trying to be updated and current. So if you attend Housing 101 or if you already have in the past, it may be different. So always come back to learn something a little different, learn something a little new. That's a good time. um, let's see. And as I said to the folks who were in the room before I started recording, I'm always trying to keep it shorter and not talk too much or include too much that would go over the hour that we've allotted for this. Sometimes I'm successful, sometimes I'm not. Let's see. Presenter view. Okay. Let me share the screen and we're gonna get started. Make sure I don't get any notifications or anything during this. Turn that off. Okay. Share, share, share. Okay, here we go. Hey, all right. So I know y'all can see like the whole browser. I don't have a problem with that. That's sort of how I have to have it set up so that way I can still see the presenter window to be able to do this. So nobody panic. We can see your whole browser. We can see it. It's okay. It's fine. Don't worry about it. But let me go. Where? Oh, I lost it again. The little presenter thing disappears. I don't understand where it goes. Uh, there it is. Okay, I found it. Yay! Okay, here we go. Housing 101, y'all. Intro to housing advocacy. Before I get started. Oh, hi, Courtney. So, actually, if y'all would want to introduce yourselves in the chat, that would be cool. Say where you're joining us from. If it's Los Angeles, give us specifics. I live in the Pico Union neighborhood. But yeah, thank you for joining us. Please introduce yourselves in the chat. Okay. So before we begin, I want to take a moment to acknowledge the land we are on today. Los Angeles occupies the ancestral and unceded lands of the Tongva people, also referred to as the Gabrielino. We honor their enduring connection to this land, as well as the elders, past, present, and emerging, who have stewarded it for generations. The Tongva people ensured every member of their community had a home, reflecting a deep commitment to communal well being. As we discuss housing advocacy today, we share a fundamental human responsibility to uphold these values, striving to ensure that all individuals have access to safe and equitable housing. Now, let me talk a little bit about Abundant Housing LA. At Abundant Housing LA, we are a grassroots nonprofit organization working to solve Southern California's housing crisis by advocating for more housing at all levels of affordability. Our mission is to create a Los Angeles County where everyone can find a home they can afford that meets their needs in their neighborhood of their choice. So we achieve this mission through several key strategies, one being education, like what you are attending now. We inform the public about the benefits of increased housing affordability, livability, and sustainability through workshops, panel discussions, and community outreach. We do advocacy. We support pro housing legislation and policies that facilitate the construction of more homes, aiming to lower rents and create a more prosperous region. We do community engagement. We mobilize residents to participate in local government processes, ensuring that the voices of pro housing advocates are heard in decisions affecting housing development. We do research and policy development. We analyze housing data and develop policy recommendations to address the root causes of the housing shortage and promote equitable growth. We also do social events, right? All of that stuff. And we find time to have a really, really good time. So we do social events. We organize casual meetups such as happy hours and barbecues. to foster community among housing advocates and provide informal settings for discussion and networking. So, by applying these strategies, Abundant Housing LA strives to make Los Angeles a more affordable, diverse, and vibrant region where everyone has access to a safe and suitable home. Before we move forward, let me introduce myself formally. My name is Joshua Gonzalez, and I'm the Director of Education and Events at Abundant Housing LA. I live in the Pico Union neighborhood, a vibrant community, but one that faces significant challenges. My block is marked as high poverty and segregated on the TCAC opportunity map. If you're curious about what that is, I can put a link to that later in the chat. But this designation reflects disparities in resources, such as access to quality schools, parks, transportation, and job opportunities. And it's compared to areas identified as low, moderate, high, or highly resourced. And resourced is basically what I just said before, which is the availability and accessibility of essential amenities like parks, schools, healthcare, things like that. The quality of housing in my neighborhood is low, despite being some of the cheapest you'll find for now. It is overcrowded, a fact that was highlighted during the COVID-19 pandemic by the LA Times, as families here often live in cramped conditions due to limited options. So, my experiences here and elsewhere in Southern California have deeply shaped my passion for housing advocacy. I've seen firsthand how housing policy impacts people's lives, how a lack of resources and quality housing can limit opportunities and perpetuate inequities. This is why I'm committed to the work that I do at Abundant Housing LA, advocating for policies and solutions that create abundant, equitable housing for everyone. So, um, housing is a fundamental need, right? This is why housing advocacy matters. It's not just a building, it's a foundation for everything else. It provides stability, safety, and a sense of belonging. Without adequate housing, people struggle with physical health, mental well being, and economic stability. As of 2024, nearly half of all US households are cost burdened, spending more than 30% of their income on housing. Housing is also recognized, is a recognized human right. But millions of people face barriers to this right every day. And this is where advocacy comes in to fight for policies that ensure housing is available, affordable, and accessible to everyone. So let's start with the roots of the inequity, right? How did we get where we're at? Well, you can probably go back so much further, but I think that this we only have an hour, right? 45 minutes now. But during the Great Depression, President Franklin D. Roosevelt, FDR, introduced the New Deal, which was a series of programs aimed at economic recovery and social reform. One of its key components, the National Housing Act of 1934, established the Federal Housing Administration, or you'll see sometimes referred to as FHA. This program revolutionized home financing by providing mortgage insurance, making home ownership, excuse me, more accessible to many Americans. However, these policies disproportionately benefited white Americans while excluding communities of color, setting the stage for decades of housing inequity. After World War II, the GI Bill provided housing benefits to returning veterans, leading to a housing boom and the expansion of suburbs. But discriminatory practices such as redlining and racially restrictive covenants excluded many people of color from these opportunities. This exclusion fueled segregation and contributed to long term racial disparities in wealth and housing access. And so, just to give you a moment with these pictures, first we have the GI Bill of Rights here, and then we have redlining, which you probably have heard of. It's likely that you've heard of this, but it basically was something that determined whether or not someone would be offered mortgage insurance or the ability to buy a home. And oftentimes the places that were redlined, or maybe all of the times that places were redlined, they suffered, a lack of resources. There was not a lot of wealth development in those areas. And so that is one of the big issues with housing and its disproportionate negative effect on folks as far as its availability. And then with the racially restrictive covenants that I mentioned, this is like on the deed, right? On the deed of the house. It was commonplace for it to include stuff that said, hey, basically, you can't live here unless you're Caucasian. And I'm sorry, the other the other exception was that well, if you're not Caucasian, you can only live here if you are in service in some way. So if you're a maid or a nanny or something like that, a grounds person, I don't know, that would be the exception. And so these things together, coupled together, really, really, really created a space that basically said no to non-white folks and to those that were also not wealthy, right? Low income folks, even white folks, were excluded from some of these places as well. Oh, I didn't do that. Okay. So, current challenges, right? Now we talked about sort of like what are the at the core of some of these inequities that we deal with housing, right? So let's talk about how things have shaped out today, right? What they look like. First though, let's do a little poll, okay? I think I set this up beforehand. So, aha, I think I can put this up. Yeah. So, what do you see as the biggest barrier to housing affordability? I just put up a poll thing, so you should be able to do a multiple choice type thing there. But the options are not enough homes. There are rules about what can be built. Building is too expensive. Affordable homes are missing. Neighbors don't want new homes, and not enough help from the government. Now, don't put what you think the right answer is, right? Like, you're like, I don't know which one is the right one. Put what you think, right? Like, what have you observed? What do you know about your families and friends, like, sort of housing experiences? Do you know that your best friend over there pays a shit ton for rent? Do you know that like these friends over here are struggling in this particular way? Put what's real for you. Um, and so far, we're getting a lot of rules about what can be built. That's at 62% right now. Okay, I like that. I see, I see. Okay. I think I'm gonna end it now. How about we give it another like 15 seconds so that way everyone can participate. We'll give it another like 15 to 20 seconds. And I'm gonna check the chat while I'm doing that. Oh, they're all of the above. Thank you, Courtney. Yeah, Matthew says, I think from my experience, all. Uh-huh. Hi, Maria. Hi, Senator. Hi, folks. Yeah, all of the above. Definitely. We are seeing issues in all of those ways. And so when we get to the point where we talk about solutions, what we do to fix this error, it's basically an error in like in a urban planning, right? We have to also realize that there's not a one size fits all solution. All of these things are issues and barriers to housing affordability, and so, unfortunately, it's also going to take a lot of little things to change to sort of like reverse that or fix it, right? But thank you everyone for participating. That was pretty fun. Here we go. Now, earlier, no, not earlier, excuse me. We were just talking about how many different things contribute to our housing crisis. This is a huge one. This is single family zoning. So zoning laws dictate what can be built and where. So single family zoning, for instance, limits diversity in housing options. Now, why does that matter? What does that mean, right? Well, when we're talking about like it limits housing options. That means that this type of zoning prevents building duplexes, apartments, or other types of housing, even if there's enough space, right? So even if one could arguably say, yes, you could fit, 4 houses on that lot or something like that, the law says that no, you can't do that. Another issue with single family zoning is that it takes up a lot of land. In many cities, most residential land is zoned for single family homes, leaving little room for housing that more people can afford. And it also raises housing costs. By limiting what can be built, single family zoning reduces the total number of homes available, which can make housing more expensive for everyone. So think of a big empty lot in your neighborhood, right? Think about that it's zoned for single family housing, and you can only build one house there, even though the lot might be large enough for two or more or 1,000 homes. And maybe this is a crazy example, right? Like it's a big example, but maybe it's not, because if you look at how many like sort of big parking lots there are around Los Angeles, this is not really out of crazy. Like it's not crazy to see this sort of like image, even if it is a little like tiny bit exaggerated, right? But basically, the rule makes it harder to create housing for people with different needs and budgets, right? And so we've got all this potential space here around here, and we can't use it. And so that's kind of what single family home zoning does, right? It makes it so that way we can't use all of the space that we actually have. And so reforming laws like that is really important and can pave the way for more inclusive housing. And so, of course, if there is inclusive housing or inclusionary housing, there is exclusionary, which basically makes up some of the stuff that we've mentioned around racially restrictive covenants, around redlining, but it contributes to racial disparities in the housing market. And that refers again to policies, practices, or zoning laws that limit who can live in the particular neighborhood or community. And these measures often exclude people based on income, race, or other socioeconomic factors, either intentionally or even as an unintended consequence. I am the kind of person that wants to see the sort of like good in every single person and all of humanity. And so I think that really sometimes we're just not aware of the harm we might be doing to others. That said, I really don't think that's the case with every single person that's ever made a housing policy. But that is something that I like to sort of enter these conversations is with a bit of empathy and a willingness to understand where they're coming from. And then hopefully we can, find a common ground or what have you. But um, according to the White House Council of Economic Advisors, these laws, the exclusionary laws, the ones like redlining, although that is not a law and not something we do anymore, but any of these things that allow for sort of a limit in the availability or who can live there, they actually limit opportunities further for marginalized communities and perpetuate inequities. So you've got sort of like a catch-22 thing, right? Like it's like you really have to change all of those processes to make sure that like none of them are still sneaking through, because that can happen. Um, One thing right now, a policy that is really shaping what our housing looks like right now. This is really, really recent. This is the Citywide Housing Incentive Program, or CHIP, and it incentivizes mixed income and 1,000% affordable, um, and 100%, excuse me, affordable housing projects citywide, especially near jobs and transit. So by increasing density allowances and streamlining approvals, CHIP aims to expand housing opportunities. And so this program reflects a broader commitment to addressing housing shortages effectively. This is also a part of what makes it so complicated. CHIP is great, but we haven't been able to convince our city council to allow CHIP to be used in single family zones, which is a problem because there is something like 70% of the land in Los Angeles that is zoned for single family homes only. So CHIP is great. Streamline the approvals, get more housing built. But when you realize that it's sort of a program that mostly can only be used in places where there already is density, where there already is multifamily housing, it's sort of like, okay, so we're still cutting people off of other resources that they might want or have need for. And so that's an issue, right? So you see how like CHIP is great, but it still has a sort of like sharp edge that we have to figure out how to work around. I will say that a couple of other recent policy things are SB 9 and SB 10. These passed a couple of years ago. And this was nice because it has its own flaws and things like that, but it's nice because it does allow a single lot to not be bound to only having one home on it. Excuse me. I need some water. Excuse me a second. Okay. But yes, SB 9 allows homeowners to split single family lots, enabling up to 4 units on properties. And SB 10 streamlines rezoning for up to 10 units near transit or urban areas. So in a way, and you may even hear some people make this argument, it sort of combats the single family home zoning by allowing folks to be able to build multiple properties on there. And some people might say, well, single family homes don't actually exist anymore because of things like this. That is not true. And so that's an issue that we're dealing with there. But these are good things. There are sort of like challenges with this, the way I understand it, but they are overall parts of a larger package that is going to be important for us to be able to sort of meet our housing needs. Um, Sustainability and equity. This is really important. I think, as we mentioned earlier, talking about the wildfires, we have a climate change issue, right? The housing crisis is right up there with the climate crisis. And so housing intersects with climate change. Sprawling suburbs increase emissions. And when we're talking about sprawling, we're talking about because there are a bunch of policies that prevent us from building more dense in urban areas or even in sort of suburban areas, it makes us build out. And so we end up building out into all of these like dangerous areas, like where there might be fires and things like that, right? And when we are building out like that, and there are still urban centers, and we're not like really in a smart way equitably distributing resources or amenities that a community may need, it ends up where people are commuting, right? They're driving for everything, right? It means that people don't have like the little mom and pop shops that are like a little stroll away or something like that. Everyone has to drive, and so that increases the greenhouse gas emissions, which have an effect on the climate. I mean, I actually did a little bit of sort of bit of a tangent, but just ride with me here. I was watching some like video about like the time before dinosaurs. So we're like way before, right? And that one time an ice age was triggered because there was too much greenery on the planet. Because there was so much greenery that it just sucked up all the CO2, and like it got so cold that it created an ice age. I'm sorry, I don't know how accurate that is, sure, but that sounds to me like we need more housing and we need more greenery. We need lawns, we need trees, native plants, things like that, right? And so I just wanted to throw that in there because I thought that was really fascinating. But yes, that goes along here because this is what we're talking about. We're talking about that we have to be mindful as we are trying to meet these housing targets to make sure that everyone is housed. We have to do so mindfully and take into consideration the climate and how we're affecting it. Denser developments near transit hubs reduce our carbon footprint, Buildings and construction contribute up to 40% of global greenhouse gas emissions, making sustainable housing solutions critical. So, building denser near resources increases access and reduces carbon footprints. Um, another thing that is sort of helping us and helping something that we use to figure some of this stuff out is the Affordable Housing and Sustainable Communities Program. So, or AHSC, this program integrates affordable housing development with climate goals. By funding projects near public transit, it reduces greenhouse gas emissions and ensures housing aligns with sustainability goals. This program exemplifies how housing and environmental solutions can work together. If you live in LA, and I always say that because you never know if someone maybe is joining us from not just another state, of course, that's a possibility too, but maybe up north or something like that. But if you live in LA, you might be aware of a certain place like not me forgetting the name of it right now when I need to know it. Oh no. But if you've ever heard of transit-oriented development, there is a metro station in Pasadena that has sort of like there's ground floor retail and restaurants, and then like on top of the station, there's like apartments, it's residential, it's mixed use, and it's beautiful. That's the kind of thing that like AHSC would fund. And that's the kind of stuff that we need more of. We need more housing. It needs to be near transit so that way people can still get around really easily without having to drive a car. Um, and so in addition to mixed use, right, which what I mentioned before, which was like when there's retail, when there's residential, things like that, mixed income housing is actually really, really important. So again, as we're building housing, as we're thinking about how we're going to make sure that everyone has a place to live, equity has to remain at the forefront. Mixed income housing prevents displacement and ensures that all residents, regardless of income, can thrive. And so, what that refers to is residential developments that include homes for people with a range of income levels from low income to moderate income to market rate households. And the goal is to create inclusive communities where people from different economic backgrounds live together in the same neighborhood or building, right? And so that's something that they actually do that in was it Vienna? That I think that there was a big housing sort of progress or what is it? Not project. But like there was research done, and they I heard stories about places that sort of operated kind of like a dorm in a way, whereas like there was like a residential advisor, but it was mixed income. Like all people of all levels of income lived in this like same building, but there was no difference between the units or anything like that. There wasn't anything that was like, oh, that's the poor room. Like, no, they didn't have that. And so I know we have some examples of that in the States and probably in California, but the one that always sticks out to me is what I heard about in like European countries where they're really all about mixed income, mixed use, and they make sure that everyone has housing. And I think that that's something that we can learn from. Um, Whew, okay, so I actually think we're doing well. We might even be a little bit early. Um, so we talked about so many things and so quickly. I speak fast. I'm sorry. But this is being recorded and you will be able to watch it again. And I will also email you the full presentation. So also I'm available for questions, things like that. We will get to Q&A shortly. But yeah, just want to point out some of that stuff. So, what do we do? What do we do? Well, Abundant Housing LA's policy agenda focuses on some key areas. Okay, so we want to legalize more homes. Policies like SB 9 and SB 10 that we mentioned address the exclusionary zoning issues we discussed earlier. SB 9 enables more housing options by allowing lot splits, and SB 10 supports rezoning for higher density development near transits. Okay, we talked about that in the roots of inequity. We also want to streamline housing production. We want to make it easier for homes to be built. Programs like CHIP simplify approval processes, as we covered, to make it easier to build affordable housing and mixed income projects citywide. Um, we also want to fund affordable housing. We want to expand the affordable housing supply. And so the AHSC uh, program integrates housing and climate goals for funding affordable housing projects near public transit. This reflects the need for housing solutions that also address environmental challenges. And finally, strengthening renters' rights. We didn't get into that today, but it's really important to know that renters' protections are crucial to preventing displacement, especially as housing costs rise, which is something we're seeing. Right, again, we go back to the point that Los Angeles has been dealing with fires, and we've already seen price gouging on housing. There are what do you call it, spreadsheets on the internet of people reporting, oh yes, this person is price gouging, right? And so as that happens, that makes it dangerous. That makes a dangerous situation for us because we have lost a part of our housing stock, right? That existed. It has to be rebuilt. And if people are going to price gouge, it's going to make it even more unaffordable to live here, right? And so these are the things that we need to engage in and sort of look at as we are trying to right these wrongs. So, what can you do, right? We talked about those things. Well, your voice matters. Advocacy isn't just about big actions either, right? It's about consistent efforts. So, writing to officials, supporting legislation, and raising awareness in your community is a great way to do sort of like small things. Have a chat with your neighbor or what have you. But if you're like, I don't know what to say, I don't know how to talk about that stuff, that's okay. We can help you. So we also encourage you to join a local Abundant Housing LA chapter near you. I think we have something like 18 chapters across Los Angeles County now. And so our chapters are where like the real on the ground organizing happens by connecting with advocates in your area. You can make an even greater impact through collaborative efforts. Excuse me. In addition to the events that we do, like organization wide, like this Housing 101, um, our chapters organize events too. And so they educate, they'll do workshops and panel discussions, narrative training sessions, things like that. Um, They do walking tours showcasing successful housing developments, neighborhood meetings to discuss local challenges and family-friendly outreach events. And they do advocacy by rallying in City Hall, providing public comment at council meetings, and meeting with legislators to push for pro-housing policies. I've been a part of that in as part of the Abundant Housing LA sort of wide organization, but I've also been a part of that in sort of like the more zoomed in chapter areas, and all of it is important. So don't ever feel like, oh, I live, in Long Beach, or I live somewhere like LA is going to take care of it, or it's not going to matter. It's going to matter. Like, part of the reason why things are the way they are right now is because a certain privileged group of people heard their opinions, and their opinions were taken more seriously than others, if others were heard at all. And so it's really important for us to embrace that our voices matter, and also to consistently sort of tell folks like, hey, especially like city council and folks like that, it's really important for us to tell them like, what you're doing right now isn't working if it's not working, right? So joining a chapter, you'll have the opportunity to connect with lots of folks, and amplify your voice. So I definitely recommend that. I can give you more information about that. I also have, after I've finished sharing, I'll put a couple of links in the chat. So just look out for that. And so yeah, follow us on our socials, sign up for our newsletter. If you want to know when the next Housing 101 is, if you're like, okay, I want to see how it's different, what's new, what did Josh do? That'll be in there. All of our other events, our chapter meetings, all of these things you will find in a monthly newsletter. It is monthly. Occasionally, we send out extra emails if there are big advocacy things happening or things like that. But for the most part, it is a once a month newsletter. It tells you that month's events coming up, chapter meetings, all of that stuff. Really great way to stay involved and to sort of cherry pick what form of advocacy is good for you. Because obviously we have folks that don't come out to any of these events, but are always the first and the quickest to fill out like the digital advocacy forms and things like that. And though we would love to see your beautiful faces at all of our events and things like that, if that's all you sort of have the capacity for, then you do you, and we appreciate it, right? So yeah, okay. I'm gonna stop talking. I can't believe it. I made it to 7:10. Less than 45 minutes. Bang. Actually, I need to make it longer. Anyway, okay. This is my information. Again, I'm Joshua M. Gonzalez. I am Abundant Housing LA's Director of Education and Events. You can find me at Joshua at abundanthousingla.org. Also on Twitter X, X Twitter. Oh, X Twitter. Oh, X Twitter. That's great. Okay, anyway, but I don't really post there very often. But feel free to follow if you would like to see the occasional like, oh, that's a housing thing. But yeah, please. I can also share all of that information too. Okay. Questions. I'm gonna stop sharing. Okay, let me get in here. Let me get in here. Oh, how do I get connected? I'm gonna start. Thank you, Delmar Station, Matthew. Woo! I don't know what happened. I'm getting old or something's happening. I could not remember. I could not remember the name of the station. But yeah, Delmar Station was the one I was talking about when referencing the AHSC and how it funds affordable housing with what do you call it? Climate centered type affordable housing, right? Excuse me. Yes, that's the Delmar Station. Love that place. How do you get connected? Yes, Kenny posted a link there. I do think there is, yes, on that page there is a little thing that says start by contacting your local organizer. Complete the form here. So that form, and I'll put it in here directly just so that's there. That has a list of all of our chapters, and it will basically connect you to the field organizer that manages the area that your chapter is in. If you don't see a chapter that's very close, then continue. Please reach out to us. You can reach out to me, anyone on the website, and we could either talk to you about starting a chapter somewhere or we can just figure out the best option for you. Um, okay, so let's see. What is the name of it? I need to check it out. So, oh, Michael, oh, must have been referring to Delmar Station. Okay. Heating apartment use way more energy for heat than single family homes. Uh, thanks. Okay, I believe they took out the language. I just want to make sure. Yes, that is, I believe that that is true, Jorge. Uh, or George, excuse me. I'm not sure how you prefer I say it. Um, I think, okay, I just want to make sure I'm not missing anything. So I'm scrolling up, scrolling up. Okay, so here, Del Mar Station. Okay, can you speak on ULA and the discretionary approval process and how those work slash haven't picked it impacted, excuse me, housing development. Okay, so I'm gonna be honest with you. I gotta pull up a little notes page for ULA. So we have had a little bit of I think we've been sort of back and forth on ULA actually. And let me see what we're looking at here. Excuse me. Uh, and if there are other questions, feel free to get those in the chat. I will address everything I can. Um, let's see. Okay. So here's my notes on ULA, commonly referred to as the mansion tax, right? It is so some of the key features of this is that there's a tax mechanism. A 4% tax is levied on property sales, valued between $5 million and $10 million. A 5.5% tax is levied on property sales valued at $10 million or more, and this tax is applied to the total sale price, not just the profit. Um, the revenue that is supposed to be gained from those taxes is earmarked for affordable housing development, rental assistance, and homelessness prevention programs. And an estimated $600 million to $1 billion annually is expected to be raised depending on the volume and value of high-end property sales. And so let's see, is there any other thing here? The tax does not apply to sales below $5 million or to certain types of transfers, such as between family members or under specific nonprofit exemptions. And I think that that's sort of an issue, right? With that. So opponents have raised lawsuits challenging this measure's legality. Revenue depends on high value transactions. So economic downturns or slower luxury property markets could affect those kinds of funding. It's really not one of those best things. It's an ambitious approach to addressing Los Angeles's housing crisis by leveraging wealth. But again, it's one of those things that if you're not careful with it, it can somehow exclude or include something that doesn't actually help us do what we want to do. It could discourage property investment and lead to unintended economic consequences, such as higher rents or reduced development. And that's like sort of the biggest critique of it, I believe. Let's see. As far as I don't, and also I don't know sort of like the current state of like how it has or has not been working. So that's something I need to look up. So thank you for asking that, Max. Michael says, when do the chip ordinances go into effect? Oh, I lost it. I lost it. Where'd it go? Oh, in effect, and is there an expectation for how long it'll take to start seeing impacts and what we'll see? Ooh, that is a good question. I don't know about the second part, but I can try to find out the first part for you. When do they go into effect? Okay. No. Every time I put chip, that is not what I'm talking about. Okay. So, I see that. Let's see. Also, J. Ross says cities other than LA put up major roadblocks to housing. Are you able to pressure Orange County cities and other wealthy suburbs that oppose apartments in general and especially affordable housing and provide little to no funding for them? Are we able to pressure Orange County cities? I mean, I think that if we worked with like an organization that was there, probably. But I think that we are right now sort of limited to like LA County. If that's the question, Jay Ross, let me know if that is the question you have. But yeah, why don't we? I'm gonna do this. If you have other questions about that sort of thing, I'm gonna put my email address in there. That's my email. Um, and then also before I forget, I'm gonna put any of these other links that I mentioned. That's like one of the biggest barriers. J Ross. I mean, yeah, I mean there are just wealthy suburbs that oppose everything. And it's hard. We're even seeing that now. It's really hard to get them to change their mind. Like despite sort of the clout, I say that carefully, that that Abundant Housing LA has sort of built up, and we have relationships with some city council members and things like that. There are still council members that represent sort of like wealthier neighborhoods, that are not caving on some of the things that we ask. And so it's hard. It's hard to do that. I imagine Orange County is way up there with some of the most problematic places. And I say problematic in the that they won't budge and won't give us a yes, right? There's nothing against the people there personally or anything. But the reality of it is that there's always a no. No one can ever tell us where their yes is. And so that if that's something that you're talking about, I definitely think we could talk more about that. Oh, and sorry, I was also, if there are any other questions, also, please put them in the chat. I was also looking up the chip ordinance stuff. Excuse me. Sorry. Excuse me. I hope everyone's having an okay night. Um, Again, I hope I mentioned this earlier. I don't know how many people are left right now, but I really hope that everyone is safe and hopefully not too directly affected by the fires. Okay, the chip ordinance. That's what I'm looking for. Oh, excuse me. Yeah, I don't think we know that yet. Um, Michael, I don't think we know that yet, actually. When they actually go into effect, it was really recent that they sort of like made their final vote about that. And so I was trying to see if there was somewhere that actually says really clearly when those go into effect, and I don't see anything. So that's something that I'll also have to follow up on, and I'll send out any information I find in the email. Oh, you found something. Hey. Okay, evaluating the effects. Oh, Aaron. Oh, I know them. Cool. Let's see. Okay, February 2025. Okay. Additional units. All right. So we should see that, it looks like soon. We're already almost February 2025. That's crazy. Um Okay, so thank you. Thank you for finding that, Michael. That is helpful. So just for anyone not following the chat or anything like that, Michael asked when do the chip ordinances go into effect? And is there an expectation for how long it'll take to start seeing impacts and what we'll see? He found that they're supposed to says that it needs to be in place by February 2025, and found that from the UCLA Lewis Center Regional Policy Studies website. Um, so yeah, I don't know how long it'll be after that before we start seeing like how it actually works. But it may be really soon. It sort of depends. I don't know if y'all experienced the Executive Directive 1 by Mayor Bass. I mean, that has its own issues. I really don't think you can talk about any kind of housing policy without recognizing that it. Sorry, I dropped my earbud. Without recognizing that it has issues, but like so many developments were approved like so soon, as soon as like ED1 went into effect, and so I imagine we'll see what happens with chip pretty soon. We'll be able to see who is applying for things, what they're applying for, all that good stuff. Okay. It looks like there might not be any other questions. I really, really, really encourage y'all, if you come up with anything else, send me an email. If I didn't answer one of your questions sufficiently, my feelings aren't hurt. Just let me know and we'll find out more information. But yeah, thank you everybody for coming tonight. I hope that this was informative and helpful. I said I'm always trying to refine the presentation and make sure you're getting like the key highlights for housing advocacy. So anyone that wants to offer feedback or anything, my email is always open. I love to hear it. So yeah, thank you everybody. Thank you so much. Happy New Year. Happy New Year, y'all. Like again, it's been kind of crummy, but Happy New Year anyway. Yeah. Okay. Thank y'all. Have a fantastic night.